Hola y buenos días. Soy yo, el señor Morris. Soy el maestro de español. ¿Cómo están ustedes? Today we're going to review all of the things that we've been talking about in this unit. And then we'll play Lotería to help us review again. Pero vamos a empezar con nuestra canción de saludos. Canten conmigo. Hola, hola, buenos días, bienvenidos, ¿cómo están? Todos juntos ya estamos listos para aprender. Muy bien cantado. Well, let's go ahead and begin our review of what we've already talked about with this question. ¿Cuáles son las partes de la planta? Well, let's look at a plant and see what the different parts are called. Well, the whole thing there, you could probably remember, is called la planta. But then we talked about the individual parts, and we said that the flower is called, remember this is kind of like a cognate, la flor. And if we just talked about the petals, do you remember the petals? That's a cognate too, so that's pretty easy. Los pétalos, los pétalos. And if we talked about these things right there in the center, right? That's where the seeds grow. And that's called las semillas. Oh, the leaves. Do you remember what those are called? Las hojas. The stem. Raise your hand and tell your teacher if you know what that is. El tallo. And down here underneath the ground, where it takes in a lot of its nutrition, the roots are called la raíz. All right. I tell you what, please review las partes de la planta with this video. Ahora, pongan atención y repitan todos. Parts of the plant. Las partes de la planta. ¿Cuáles son las partes de la planta? Esta es la semilla de la planta. Esta es la raíz de la planta. Este es el tallo de la planta. Esta es la hoja de la planta. Esta es la planta. Esta es la flor de la planta. Este es el pétalo de la planta. Esta es la semilla de la planta. Muy bien. Right now we're going to look at another question that we talked about in this unit. ¿Qué necesitan las plantas para crecer? Remember, what do they need the plants to grow? Or what do plants need to grow? And we talked about these things. So here are all of the things that we talked about. Do you remember what they're called? Let's see. Ah, this one. Now, we've talked about this a couple of times. We talked about it in relation to the seasons. Do you remember what it's called? A la una, a las dos, a las tres. El sol. El sol. That's right. Oh, and this one. Yeah, you have to do this to your plants, right? You have to give them water. Y en español es el agua. El agua. How about this one? Do you remember this? We said, yeah, it's air, but it's a certain part of the air. In English, it's carbon dioxide. But they kind of turn it around in Spanish. Dióxido de carbono. Dióxido de carbono. And of course, they need something to grow in, some soil or dirt, right? And we said that in Spanish, that's called la tierra. La tierra. Well, right now, I'd like for all of you to review the things that a plant needs to grow with this video. Pongan atención y repitan todos. Seed to plant. ¿Qué necesitan las plantas para crecer? Las plantas necesitan tierra. Las plantas necesitan sol. Las plantas necesitan agua. Las plantas necesitan dióxido de carbono. All right. Hopefully this is all looking pretty familiar to you. And if you're not able to recall it yourself, at least you can say, oh yeah, I recognize that. That looks familiar. Now, after we talked about what the parts of a plant and what plants need to grow, we started talking about foods that we get from plants. Remember? And we said that there were so many that we couldn't learn them all. But we did start off by talking about a couple of groups. Do you remember? How about this group? Do you remember what these are called? They're cognates, so they're called las frutas. Las frutas. Remember those? We talked about some of those. And we also talked about this group of foods. Do you remember what these are called? Tell your teacher if you think you know. Did you tell your teacher that these are called las verduras? Las verduras. You remember that? And then we talked about some other things that we get from plants, like wood, which in español es madera. Madera. You remember that? Oh, well, you probably use these to write with, don't you? Do you remember what this is called? We measured these. Es el lápiz. El lápiz. Right? Man. Oh, well, you probably have this around your classroom there at school. You probably have it at home. Furniture is called los muebles. Los muebles. And then remember the class where I was playing with my little cup and ball made out of wood? And we said a lot of toys are made out of wood. And these are called los juguetes, right? All right. Finally, we looked at the answers to this question. ¿Cuáles son los hábitats de las plantas? Do you remember that? ¿Cuáles son los hábitats de las plantas? Well, we talked about 4 different ones. Let's go ahead and look at those right now. This first one we looked at has a lot of trees and a lot of wildlife. Yeah, do you remember what it was called? A la una, a las dos, a las tres. El bosque. El bosque, that's right. And then there's this one, real dry, a lot of sand, a lot of cactus. El desierto. El desierto. Oh, this one here is a cognate, with salt water and sharks and dolphins. El océano, el océano. And the last one was a little pond area. And we said that if it's a pond in Spanish, we call it la charca, la charca. And we looked at some of the individual plants, like this one here. Do you remember what this is called? It's a cognate for the type of tree it is. In English, es un pino, right? A pine tree. How about this one? This was the oak tree. In español, un roble, un roble. We also looked at a couple of flowers, like this one, and this one's a cognate too, es la rosa, la rosa. And we looked at this one, which is a sunflower, and we said this one turns with the sun. In Spanish, it's called el girasol, el girasol. I tell you what, please review the plant habitats and the plants that we just discussed with this video while I get everything ready to play Lotería. Ahora, presten atención y repitan todos. Plant habitats. ¿Cuáles son los hábitats de las plantas? Este es el bosque. El bosque es un hábitat del árbol. Este es el desierto. El desierto es un hábitat del cactus. Este es el océano. El océano es un hábitat del alga marina. Esta es la charca. La charca es un hábitat de la ninfea. Muy bien. Ahora vamos a repasar con... You got it. Lotería. I hope that you all have your boards ready and something. See, I've got my little fichas, my little plastic things here that I'm going to mark my game board with. You guys can use pennies or pieces of corn or beans, or if you have fichas like me, you can use those too. Now let's look at one of the boards here and see what we need to do. We're going to try to get 3 across, 3 up and down, or we can go for 3 diagonal. And once you get 3 in a row, you're supposed to say, Lotería. All right. Well, I tell you what, everybody go ahead and get a board and get ready. And we're going to start off the very first one. If you have La Planta, if you have La Planta on your board, go ahead and mark it now, La Planta. Okay, now don't get this confused, and don't mark the one that has el tallo, the stem, or la flor. Just look for this one that says La Planta. Okay, do you have the one that says el pétalo? If you have el pétalo on your board, go ahead and mark it now, el pétalo. And that's the petal, right? How about this one? If you have el sol, if you have el sol on your game board, go ahead and mark it now, Boy, I bet you guys are beating me because I'm not doing too well yet. If you have la tierra on your game board, go ahead and mark it now, please. La tierra. Do you remember what that is? All right, that's the soil or the dirt that they grow in. How about la madera? If you have la madera on your game board, go ahead and mark it now. Remember what madera is? Yeah, we make a lot of things out of that we use. Ah, el bosque. El bosque. I like to spend time there, looking at the trees and all of those animals that live there. El bosque. That's right, the forest. If you have that, go ahead and mark it. El desierto. El desierto. If you have el desierto on your game board, go ahead and mark it. That one's a cognate. That's really easy to figure out. El tallo. Now, if you have el tallo on yours, remember el tallo is the stem of the plant. If you have that on yours, go ahead and mark it now, please. El tallo. If you have las frutas on your game board, go ahead and mark it now. Ooh, I love las frutas. If you have el lápiz on your game board, go ahead and mark it now. If you have el lápiz. Hey! Loteria! Loteria! All right. Did you guys remember say loteria? Because I know sometimes my students get confused and say, bingo. Well, it's not bingo. We're playing loteria now. I think we've got time for one more game. You guys go ahead and if you want to keep the same board, you can keep the same board. If you want to trade it around to change boards, go ahead and do that now. Let's go ahead and play one more time real quickly. Everybody pay attention now. And let's start off with this one. If you have el agua on your game board, go ahead and mark it. El agua. If you have las verduras on your game board, go ahead and mark them. Las verduras. And those are good for you. And I like them too. La charca. If you have la charca on your game board, go ahead and mark it. La raíz. Yeah, that part that's under the ground there. La raíz de la planta. Go ahead and mark that. Oh, right there in the very center. If you have las semillas. If you have las semillas, go ahead and mark that on your board. Los muebles. If you have los muebles, go ahead and mark that, okay? All that furniture stuff. If you have la flor. Now, remember, this isn't the semillas on the inside. This is the whole thing. La flor. If you have la hoja, go ahead and mark la hoja on your board. Las frutas. Ooh, I love those. Las frutas. Go ahead and mark that on your board. If you have los juguetes, go ahead and mark that on your board. Okay. Hey, all right, check it out. Yay! Loteria, loteria. How did you guys do? Did somebody win? Well, I hope so. You should all keep practicing because the next lesson will be the evaluation lesson. It's a chance for us to see how the Spanish lessons are doing. And I'm sure that you're all going to do really fine. Teachers, let me remind you that our next lesson will be the evaluation for Unit 9. If you want your students to participate, you'll probably want to copy the test. Students, if you understood what we went over today and you get a chance to practice a little bit more before the evaluation, I'm sure you'll do very well. Pero ¿saben qué? Ya es hora de despedirnos. For our goodbye song today, I'd like to sing one of my favorites, La Cucaracha. Canten conmigo. Todas las muchachas tienen en los ojos dos estrellas, pero las mexicanitas de seguro son más bellas. La cucaracha, ya no quiere caminar. ¿Por qué no quiere? Porque le falta dinero para gastar. Muy bien, until next class. Adiós y hasta luego.